Welcome to Groups this week. As a church, we exist to help all people become fully devoted followers of Jesus. And we believe doing life together is a crucial part of that journey. Now, during this time, we're going to unpack and dig deeper into the sermon we've heard this past week. Let's dive in as we continue to grow in our faith, knowledge, and love of Jesus together. All right, well, hello everyone. It's Daniel here again with this week's group guide discussion with our beloved Pastor Reverend David Wood. And so, David, we've been working through the Gospel of Luke for the past several weeks, going chapter by chapter. And so this last Sunday, we continued in Luke chapter 3 with John the Baptist preparing the way. And so could you maybe walk us through what is going on in this passage and what have you been noticing is happening in it?
Yeah, it's so funny to say it's Daniel again. I mean, I think people are happy to see you again.
Hopefully.
Just so you know. Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting passage. Is Luke chapter 3, verses 1 to 20, and I mean, what Luke does is he does something a little bit different than the other gospel writers. He basically takes a lot of the John the Baptist material and he kind of clumps it together into one section. I mean, John will show up later on, but this is the big section. And there's so much going on in this passage. And the way Luke writes it is he's trying to communicate something. And you'll notice when you look at the passage is that there's a lot of strange names that are listed, right? So, you got a guy Tiberius, you got Pilate, you got Herod, you got Philip. And Caiaphas and Annas, so a bunch of big names, and these are like the movers and the shakers of the world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like the Roman Empire is the empire, and so we have the emperor listed. We got the representative of the emperor in Palestine with Pilate, and so you get all these big names, and it's so interesting because you get all this macro stuff, macro description, and then in the midst of that, and he says, and then the word of the Lord came to John, son of Zechariah, which is, and that's like a prophetic statement. It's like it's a statement that's usually associated with the Old Testament prophets. The word of the Lord came to. And so immediately we're introduced to the adult John. I mean, last time we saw him, he's just a baby, right. Just being born. Now you have the adult John, and he is a prophet, a la Old Testament prophets. And he comes on the scene, and what you have happening here is you have the proclamation of the Word of God in the midst of all the macro political stuff that's going on, which I think reminds us of a bunch of things. It tells us, one, that there is no real sacred secular division. It's not like, okay, here's the secular stuff that's going on, and here's the God stuff going on over here. It's the word of the Lord comes to John in the midst of all this stuff, in this larger context. And it reminds us that God, he operates in all areas of life. And it also reminds us that God is a God of history. I've said this before, that God is not an abstract God. He's not on some cloud far away. He's not a worldview. He's not a concept. He's not a philosophy. But he is personal, and he reveals himself in the raw material of history. And boy, do you ever get that. Now, I'll say one more thing, too. Well, I might say more things than one more thing, but one of the ways to understand Luke and Luke Acts, because those are the two books that Luke writes, is to look at it almost like an hourglass. Because what Luke does is when he begins his gospel, he begins with these macro names, these people, movers and the shakers of history, Tiberius, Pilate, all these guys, right? And then what happens as you make your way through Luke, it gets closer and closer and closer just to the person and the meaning of Jesus. And it culminates in the cross, right? And then you have Jesus' death and resurrection. And then once you get to the book of Acts, it's like, okay, how's this going to affect Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth? And so he starts macro, focuses in on Jesus, and then you see the implication of Jesus and the church for the whole world. That's Luke's big thing. Luke is he's a Gentile, and he wants to teach us why Jesus matters for the whole world. And it's laid out in the structure of Luke and Acts.
I have never thought of it that way. That's
now
incredible
you know. Now
imagery.
you know.
Thanks, David. Hopefully, if you didn't know that either, my mind just got blown away.
That's very cool when
That's
you see
so
it.
cool. Yeah. So I guess, like, why do you think Luke includes this section specifically of the life and ministry of John the Baptist in this?
Well, I think it's setting things up for what we're going to talk about next week, and that's the baptism of Jesus.
Gotcha.
For sure. But I think there's a lot of things that still need to speak to us in this, because what you have happening is you have John calling people to get ready. The Messiah is coming, get ready. And he calls them to get ready by doing something strange, and that is to be baptized, which is kind of an unusual thing within Judaism. You have kind of rituals using water for purification, for sure, but this idea of baptism is kind of interesting. And he calls people to be, immersed in water. It's a baptism of repentance, which is basically saying, hey, stop doing what you're doing, get ready, the Messiah's coming. Yeah. And so when and he also says that everybody needs to be baptized, and you can't rely on the fact that you're children of Abraham. So don't be relying on your pedigree. Oh, we're part of the people of God. He's like, no, everybody needs to be baptized. And he calls them. I always imagine John the Baptist as a Scot. You brood of vipers, right? He kind of calls them out like that. You brood of vipers, and gets right into their face. And then the people are so moved by this, and they're like, okay, we need to get ready to see Jesus, which, again, this applies to you and me as well. And then people say, well, what do we do? And so he goes, hey, if you got 2 coats, give one away. Tax collectors gather around him, which is super interesting, because tax collectors are always listed alongside sinners. Right? It's always sinners and tax collectors. And they come around John, they're like, well, what should we do? And they're like, well, stop cheating people, right? Which they were known for doing. And then you have soldiers coming along. Well, what do we do? Well, stop extorting people by, shaking them down with your sword and, extorting money from them. Yeah. And as I mentioned, I mean, what's so interesting about that is, like, what is common in each one of those responses? Basically what John is saying is, like, look, if you want to prepare to see Jesus, you need to trust in him. Stop trusting in holding onto 2 cloaks. Stop trusting in exploiting people and taking more money than you need. Stop shaking people down. Trust in God. Put all your trust in him, because he's coming. Yeah. And so it's a rich passage, and I think it speaks to us today.
Yeah. No, for sure. And you took my next question from me, but maybe there'd be more. Yeah, you mentioned how, really the reality is, like, trust in God in that way. And are there any other takeaways in this passage which apply to our Christian life, other than, obviously, trusting in God?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big ones, and we don't like to talk about it, is that there's consequences to being faithful to God. And one of the consequences is it can land you in a lot of trouble. Yeah. And that's how the passage ends. It's like, John, John is fearless, right? And he calls out Herod for, basically taking his, I believe it's his brother's wife to be his wife, and he calls him out for immoral behavior. And when you call out a leader, a political leader, for things, there are consequences. And sure enough, the passage ends with him in prison. Right. And we know how the story plays out, is that he ends up dying for being faithful in his testimony to the ways of God. And when you and I are faithful in our testimony to the ways of God, what does Jesus remind us? In this world, you and I will have trouble. Yeah. So that comes out in the passage too. Come
on. I was just reading Matthew 10 yesterday about, yeah, they're going to hate you because of my name.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it goes right into that. Well, thanks, David. I think that's a lot. That's going to give you guys a lot to
Should keep you guys
cover.
going, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. Hope your discussion is great, and we'll see you next week. Hope you enjoyed the teaching today. If you're wanting to follow along with the community group's discussion guide with your group, you can head to cachurch.ca/media, where you can find the discussion guide. Not only are there questions there related to the sermon, but there's also prayer prompts that relate to the passage or the topic that we were talking about, and practices that you can, on an individual level or a group level, begin integrating into your life to not only bring the knowledge into your mind, but to begin living it out.